Hello, and welcome to the James in the Frames podcast. I'm your host, James, and here I talk about some of the greatest frames ever filmed, while discussing film-related topics with you guys. This is a follow-up episode to my review on The Witch. You can find that on my YouTube channel. It's up there. Go check it out if you want a spoiler-free review of the film, because I'll be talking in-depth spoilers here. I'll still give a short summary for those who still haven't seen The Witch. The Witch is written and directed by Robert Eggers in his directorial debut, and stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Ralph Fiennes, and Kate Dickie. The story takes place in 17th century New England, and it's about a family that is banished from their Puritan village. They eventually set up a farm near the edge of a large forest in the wilderness, but soon a supernatural force begins to intrude on their new life. It's a fantastic, authentic entry into the horror genre with an immersive environment, great performances, a chilling score, and beautiful cinematography. I highly recommend this one to horror fans and people who are looking for good horror movies that aren't as cliched as most of the mainstream ones. So, with that being said, it is now time to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen The Witch, this is your warning. Alright, 3, 2, 1, go. Well, The Witch, my goodness, there's not a lot that happens in this film, because that's one of the things that I love about this film. It's very day in the life, but it's a day in the life horribly gone wrong. You're looking at this family, what their lifestyle is in the wilderness and trying to adapt, but that adaptation to the wilderness proves to be unsuccessful because, well, they're almost immediately, I don't know how much time passes after they leave the village, but they leave the village, maybe like a week or a couple weeks pass, they've got their stuff set up, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, their youngest son disappears. And that sequence with Anya Taylor-Joy playing with the youngest son, with the baby, like that whole boo scene, was really well done. It's one of the shots that is revealed in the trailer, and that's one thing that kind of bothers me, because it's a really good moment. Because the second you see the look on your face, you know there's something wrong, and then the camera cuts to, well, the empty blankets, and then it slowly pans up to an empty forest. And the forest plays such an important role in this movie. The trees seem to tower over the main characters in this movie. There's a lot of sequences, particularly the ones where they're hunting in the woods. I think it's when Anya Taylor-Joy's character and Caleb... No, it's Thomason. Thomason and Caleb go into the woods. And I think it's when they get split up. Caleb's by himself, and he's looking upwards or he's just looking forwards, and the camera is on the ground pointed upwards, so it gives the impression that the trees are really towering over Caleb and just kind of trapping him in this dark forest. And I really like it when the camera does that in this film. There's a lot of really good shots in this movie. And speaking of shots, I talked about the cinematography in my spoiler-free review, but the cinematography is just gorgeous. It's so good. I mean, the nighttime scenes are just amazing, especially when the only source of light comes from a candle. I mean, this family's having a candlelit dinner, and it's basically just like a small flame in the middle of the table illuminating everyone. It's very somber and very creepy at the same time. But getting back to the whole child abduction scene, that was pretty creepy. Especially I think it's a 3 to 2 minute sequence that takes place after, when the witch, to put it lightly, makes raspberry jam out of the young child. Oh god, that's not a nice way to say it. But it's a very disturbing sequence, and yeah, basically the witch, sorry if this is a little disturbing for the listeners, but you've already seen the movie if you've gotten this far. This witch, what she does is that she takes the young child and she makes, like, I don't know if it's a potion or she does something to it, and she mashes it up and then she slathers it on her body, and she hugs the stick and she starts to levitate. It's pretty insane. So that sequence definitely got under my skin, but there are a lot more sequences that do that. I mean, there's, first of all, Thomason coming back to her house and showing the reaction and the complete state of the mother when she delivers when and after she delivers the news. Like, the mother's completely locked away, like sleeping, like crying and praying. And it's really just it's really emotional. And I'll say this again, Kate Dickie gives probably the most emotionally in her performance. She does a lot more emotionally than the rest of the cast. She has to be like super like worried and tearful and always on the verge of collapse in almost every scene. Like, there's only a couple scenes where she seems calm and collected, and there's one scene where, well, I'll talk about that scene in a second, but it is a little slow during the first half. But I don't really find that to be an issue. A lot of people do. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, it's super slow, and oh, this is so boring." Yeah, it is. It is kind of boring, I suppose. But if you're watching this for the first time, it's kind of interesting to see how good the production design team, how good the production design was in this film, because it's really, really good. It's very, very authentic, and I'll keep saying authentic a million times, but damn, it is very, very authentic. And it's the same case with the Lighthouse, because the lighthouse, they had to build a lighthouse. They had the lighthouse keeper uniforms. They had the lighthouse keeper manual. And here they have the exact wardrobe from the 17th century, and the little huts and the architecture, and basically the sets are really good. It was shot on location. I don't think there's any parts of this movie that were filmed on a soundstage. I'm highly doubtful. I don't see any sound stages or anything looking like a soundstage. So, very authentic. Yeah, so as the film progresses, after the death, well, they don't know that the first child died, but they eventually accept it. After the death of the first child, the film, about its 30 to 40 minute mark, really picks up pace. Especially after you get some time with the family. Because you get the time with Thomasin and her little bro, Caleb. And you also get time with the twins. And the twins are a really creepy part of this movie, because if you notice, throughout the film, they do various chants. They chant about weird things. They just say weird stuff, like, in the background. Like, you don't pay attention to them at first, because they're just kids. They're playing around. But if you listen, like it sounds like some weird demonic language, like at some points in the movie. And especially, well, when Black Phillip is on screen. Black Phillip, my God. The animal trainers did really good, because that goat is just terrifying. It's just really scary in every scene he's in. They start chanting, like, Black Phillip, blah, 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 and it's really unsettling. And as the story progresses, you start to find out about witchcraft and, like, what it means through the dialogue of the mother and the father and Thomasin. And then you start to realize, like, hey, are they actually chanting? Like, is that actually an embodiment of Black Phillip? But getting back on track, when this film really picks up is after Caleb goes missing. I mean, you get some scenes with Caleb and his dad. By the way, Ralph Ineson, the dude has range in this movie. He plays the character really, really well. His voice is very thick, and I can't even do the voice because it's just such a commanding yet soft at times voice. He has such range. He goes from booming and bellowing to tender and calm. He does that sometimes instantly, and that's really good acting. So the scene where Caleb gets abducted or Caleb gets caught by the witch, he goes up to the witch house, which was just terrifying. You see this leg come out of this dark doorway, and for a second you think, like, oh, this is just going to be some disfigured, like, horrible thing. But it's not, because if you think about it, witches back then, they would appear as young. They would appear as, like, harmless, like, oh, I'm just another girl, like, no, oh, I'm lost, and, like, suddenly they just kill you or do whatever with you. I don't know what the witch does with Caleb, and I like how that's left open. Like, what the hell did she do? Did she rape him? Did she do some weird, like, witchcraft stuff to him? And, well, as we find out in the next scene, which I'm going to talk about in a second, she kind of did. But yeah, that whole scene of her being like this young, beautiful woman, and then this ugly old hand reaches out and grabs Caleb by the head, was very scary. And while I'm on this scene, I believe near this scene, like in the film's runtime, like, we get to see some of, like, the animals and how they play a role. particularly the rabbit that appears. I think it's when I think it's when Caleb and his dad go out hunting and they spot this rabbit, and like the rabbit causes like the rifle. I actually love the vintage rifle in this movie. It's so cool. It causes the rifle to like backfire into the dad's eye, and it was like really creepy. I'm like, oh, this bunny has some supernatural stuff surrounding it. And I didn't research much about rabbits and what their significance was back then, but I'm pretty sure they have a big meaning. So that scene with the dad, and then the scene with Thomason when they're in the woods and the rabbit kind of appears, and it's like, what the hell is this? And Caleb like goes after it. I'm like, why are you going after it? And then I think like maybe he's under a spell, or maybe the rabbit is like a part of the witch's spell. Like it's very creepy, and the way the animals look in this movie, the goats and the rabbits, and I don't think there's any other animals besides that, but they look very, very creepy. They look almost like they're trying to hypnotize you. They kind of just stare at you with like wide eyes, just kind of just creepily staring you down, and that really unsettles me. And I made a comparison in my spoiler-free review. It was about okay, now there's birds in the background. This is insane. I start talking about supernatural animals and birds start going crazy. What I was doing in my review is I was comparing the scene of the rabbit in The Witch to the scene of the fox in Antichrist, when the fox kind of just like, it's like this maimed fox, and he looks at the camera and he says like, chaos reigns, and it's like really creepy, like this talking fox. Like it's in that category of really creepy and weird and uncanny. Yeah, that's those scenes with the animals in this movie, man. They're really, really creepy. But moving on, we have a terrifying scene, which is the apple scene, or the witch curse scene, however you want to call it. It's also quite unnerving and disturbing. And the child actor, whose name is Harvey Scrimshaw, he does a really fantastic job in this scene. He goes through so many emotions. He goes through fear, pain, and then he gets like happy and creepy and gleeful and weird for a second. And he kind of just looks at like my Lord and Savior. Then he falls back down and he just dies. And that was shocking to me. I was like, oh, he's cured. And like the Ralph Inessen's like super happy, and everybody's like, yeah, he's cured. And then it's, no, he's actually dying. He's falling down, and he's possessed by something, because he coughs up a bloody apple, first of all, which is insane. That's like so creepy. And while this is happening, the twins are like rolling around on the floor, like imitating what's happening to Caleb, and that's really creepy as well. Like the twins in this movie, I'll tell you. You would watch a scene in this movie and you'd see the twins playing in the background, and the first time you wouldn't pay much attention. But after you know what happens at the end of this film, it's pretty creepy. And in this scene, definitely, when they mimic what's happening, it's like they're almost under a spell or something. But Harvey Scrimshaw just does a really fantastic job. And then the performances by everyone, including Kate Dickie, who once again just shells out such an emotional performance. She just tells like Thomason like to get out and stuff like that. And then there's like a moment between Ralph Inessen and Anya Taylor-Joy where they have like a discussion, and it's like a very, very well acted scene from both of them. And then I think after that is when we get the iconic shot of Ralph Inessen looking down at Kate Dickie's character lying in like the hole dug by him, like on top of the coffin. Like it's a very good shot. And I think from that point onward begins my favorite third act in a recent horror movie. Let's just put it that way. Like in recent memory, in recent horror movies, I can't really say in general. I mean, you know what? Yeah, in general, because this third act, stuff happens. A lot of stuff happens. The entire third act that occurs afterwards, especially the scene where the witch arrives and basically slaughters the twins, and then the ending, and it's insane. And I'm going to talk about one of the most disturbing sequences of the third act, and probably the most, and one of the most terrifying sequences I've seen in a horror film in recent memory, is the scene where after Thomason is trapped inside of this shed with Black Phillip and the two twins, and Ralph Inessen is like, think on thy sins, and he traps her in. I was so uneasy. I was so nervous. My heart was pounding. Even on my rewatch, I just felt so uneasy. Like, no, this is not the thing to do. Like, don't do this. Don't leave them in here. But soon enough, it turns to night, and, well, to put it lightly, shit hits the fan. Basically, what happens is that the witch, I don't know if she like teleports in, or just like kind of appears inside of the shed. But she appears and she seems to be like snacking on like a dead goat or something. The camera slowly zooms in on her, and then we see her, we see her turn around, and she sort of like gives like a laugh, and then it cuts to Thomason's face, and the reaction shot by Anya Taylor-Joy is that of genuine terror. And the witch basically slaughters the twins in that scene. And it's executed with such brilliant sound design and the visual of Anya Taylor-Joy's reaction. And I talk about sound design because it's such an awful noise. And it seems, if I had to draw a comparison with it, it seems like the noise that Alex Kittner makes in Jaws. He's the second victim in Jaws. You know, the young boy who's swimming around in this yellow raft, and then the shark comes and kind of eats him. And the famous Jaws shot happens and all that. Like, it's a frightening cry of pain. In that scene when he gets eaten by the shark, like, he's getting dragged down and bubbles are coming up, and then he gets, like, engulfed in blood, and then you see, like, the wide shot of him getting eaten. But the sound he makes when he's eaten, it's a frightening cry of pain, followed by some voice-altering outside force, like elemental or physical, whether it's the water in Jaws distorting the cry, making it even more terrifying, because he kind of goes like, not that way, but you get where I'm going. That happens, and it modifies the voice, and it makes it more disturbing. It just kind of makes it like, oh shit, he's getting eaten, and he's also drowning at the same time, and you get to hear that through the sound design. And in The Witch, it's the sound that plays while we're looking at Anya Taylor-Joy's face. Like, she looks at the twins, and it's just this horrible, like, crunch mixed with the cries of the twins. Like, it's very hard to make out. And that's what I love about it. It's like, you have no idea what the witch did to these kids. It's all left up to the imagination. And that's one of the things I love about this film, because there's a lot of, especially, I mean, the ending, it might be pretty self-explanatory for those who are versed in, like, witch culture and stuff like that, but for a normal viewer, like, you wouldn't know what the hell just happened. And in this scene, it's kind of left off, like, it's just this horrible noise, followed by, like, this terrifying crunch, it's like it's, I can't imitate it, but if you guys watch the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. It then cuts to an image that is just forever seared into my brain. That it's just so plain out weird and perturbing, and it's the 3 to 4 second static shot or still shot of the mother having her breast picked at by a crow, which is already just absolutely insane. Like, I have no words for that. Her breast is being picked out by a crow while she laughs. She laughs maniacally while it happens. It just feels so wrong. It's just so strange. Like, this woman is just lost. She's just lost her mind, because both of her kids are dead. She's in such this fragile state, and to have this supernatural force come in and, like, brainwash her or make up this vision of Caleb and her youngest son coming back, and then just having her thinking that this crow is her son, pecking, like, just laughing, like, in her own dreamlike state. It's very disturbing. And it's exactly like the moment in The Lighthouse when Young, played by Robert Pattinson, finds a mermaid on the shore. And at first it's like, oh, wow, he's actually going to get with this mermaid, blah, blah, blah. And you're subconsciously thinking, like, no, it's a mermaid. How is he gonna have intercourse with a mermaid? And then that sequence ensues where the mermaid lets out that chilling cry of, it's just so mysterious, I have no words. And then Young, like, runs away slowly, almost like it's almost like when you're in a dream and you're trying to run away from something, but you're running slowly away from it. Like, it's that scene. Like, it's the mermaid laughing on the shore, and it's like him trying to run away, and it's kind of like moving in slow motion. And that scene in The Lighthouse and this scene in The Witch are very similar in terms of dreamlike terror and that presentation to it. Yeah, that sequence is absolutely insane, and it's just one of the most terrifying sequences I've seen. So then it's the next morning, and the shed is completely destroyed by some supernatural force. Ralph Ineson comes out. He gets mauled by Black Phillip. It's pretty brutal. And then Kate Dickie comes out, and she's just lost it at this point. She gives a really good performance in this part. She just goes absolutely insane. And Anya Taylor-Joy plays off her so well. She's like, please don't, like, don't do this. Like, why are you doing this? Like, I never intended for this to happen. Like, why is this happening? And it's the kind of horror that I really enjoy, when the destiny of someone is controlled by a supernatural force, and there's no way that they can stop it. And it's the inevitable aspects of it that really gets under my skin and just scares me. Like, it's the same case for Hereditary, but that's for another day. Their dynamic in this scene is just really scary to watch, and they play their roles really well in this scene. Like, Anya Taylor-Joy is kind of like defending herself, like, no, like, don't do this, and Kate Dickie's just lost in this point. She's lost everything. She's lost her husband, she's lost her kids. The only person that's left is a person who probably caused all this, so she just goes absolutely insane and tries to murder Thomasin, which does not work, because Thomasin grabs a knife and just stabs it in her forehead. And then the expression off of Kate Dickie's face, like, she goes like, oh, you're stabbing at me? Okay. And then she, like, starts choking Thomasin, and Thomasin's just like, stop. Like, it's a really good acted scene. And then Thomasin just, like, sticks the knife, not sticks the knife, she basically just slashes at her face until she's dead, and it really makes your heart, like, cringe, and it's just not, it's not a very pleasant scene to watch. And now we have reached probably the most talked part of this movie, which is the ending. And I'm going to transition into Q&As, because there's a question about the ending. So, yay, Q&As are back. Let's go into some Q&As. This first one is, what does the ending mean to you? Or what do you take from it? It's a very... On my first watch, I wasn't that confused as most people were. Not to sound pretentious, like, oh, I know everything. I really didn't know why she was happy at the end or laughing. I just thought it was kind of like a weird, like, psychological thing that I'm sure I'll find about later in some script analysis. But I thought about it by myself first, and I recommend this to people who don't understand the ending of a movie. Don't go directly to a video essay to have it explained to you. Try and get your own conclusions from it. And if your own conclusions are similar to the one person who's doing it in the video essay, then that's awesome. But if your conclusions are different, like, just keep it as your own. Just don't follow the majority. Just kind of if you have a different interpretation, keep that interpretation, because it's good to have different perspectives. So the ending, at first, it meant to me that, well, Thomasin made a deal with the devil to be free of her worries, and now she's gonna go become a part of this witch cult, and she just ends up becoming the witch, and that's like the namesake of the title. But I did go online, and I read a lot of different discussions, and I participated in some of them, and a lot of them said that at the end, she has nowhere to go. Like, her family's dead. The nearest village is very far away, and she'd die or freeze or starve before she got to the village. And even if she got to the village, she'd probably be banished or hanged for I don't know, matricide or something weird like that. And if she stays, she'll starve, because there's, like, no more food. Like, all the animals are dead, all the crops are dying because, well, it's winter and she has to hunt, and no way she's going into those woods by herself. So she basically makes a deal with the devil because she's got nowhere to go. And I would interpret the ending as this kind of like, it's basically like a character-defining moment for Thomasin in this movie, because she's been pretty miserable. Not miserable, but mostly miserable throughout the entire film. Like, she's had to deal with the death of her little brother, then the disappearance of her brother, then having her mom, like, call her out, like, being a witch and being accused of being a witch, and her dad doubting her and wanting to cast her out. So it's kind of like a moment of salvation in a bad way for Thomasin. And she's laughing and enjoying the moment, because when she gets to that witch bonfire, you see that her face is kind of like, it's not happy. Like, she's pretty, like, shocked at what she's seeing. Like, damn, this is a witch ritual. Like, I shouldn't be here. But then as the chanting increases and it gets more excited in a way, it gets, like, more engaging and more fast-paced, they all start levitating. And I gotta say, the score in this moment is just so amazing. It's like this demonic chant that's really well done. And actually, fun fact real quick, I think the women who actually did that track in the film, who actually did like the chanting and stuff like that in the studio, were friends of Robert Eggers, who had gone to, I think it was a yoga class with his wife or with him. I forgot which one it was. But then he asked them to do the chant, and they have like this ancient language that they know, and they did the chant there. I thought that was pretty interesting. But getting back on track, as this chanting continues, the witches start to levitate into the sky, and Thomasin soon starts to levitate with them. And in that moment, she kind of floats away from her troubles. Like, she flies away to be wherever she wants, to live deliciously. Her problems are all instantly gone because she made a pact with the devil, and now she's just gonna live her life being a witch. And I would kind of view this as a parallel to Dani in Midsommar, when she becomes a part of the Swedish group or Swedish cult in the end. Like, she's horrified at first at what she's done, but then she realizes by joining this new family, by joining this new group, she's leaving all her troubles behind and starting a new life that she'll enjoy. And I think that's an interesting parallel between Thomasin and Dani, because they both basically, Dani doesn't make a deal with the devil, but Thomasin makes a deal with the devil, but they both leave their past lives behind. So I found that to be a very interesting parallel between the two. And I think that's what the ending means. I think it's Thomasin just basically taking on a new persona. Okay, the next question is, what are your thoughts on the representation of animals? I kind of already talked about that, but I guess I could touch on it one more time. Like, Black Phillip, like the goat in this movie, like Black Phillip, like, it's probably a symbol for the devil's presence at their homestead. Like, it's just there, but they don't know it. That's basically what I can take from that. And it's very creepy if you think of it that way, especially when the twins chant like Black Phillip, like that whole thing. Like, you have no idea, like, oh, they're just kids, they're just rambling. But you realize in the end of the movie, no, they weren't rambling, and Black Phillip actually like kills like the father and does like some crazy stuff. And then the rabbits. I mean, the rabbit is just plain creepy. That's all I have to say, because the rabbit, he kind of appears, I guess, as a way to lure Caleb into the woods, because the first time he appears, Caleb is kind of like entranced by it. He's like, what the hell is wrong with this rabbit? And the rabbit kind of just stares him down, makes the rifle backfire into the dad's eye. And then when Caleb himself goes out to chase after the rabbit, he just gets completely lost in the woods. And then he finds the witch's hut, and that whole sequence happens. So I think the rabbit served that purpose. Okay, we've got one more question here. Will you be doing in-depth reviews on your YouTube channel on camera? I was actually going to talk about that in the conclusion, but since you asked, I'll talk about it. Yeah, I do plan to do discussion-orientated videos on the YouTube channel. For now, I'm keeping it to the podcast, and I'll tell you why in a second. But for now, I'm keeping it to the podcast. I think it's just an easier alternative. That way, you guys can come along with me on the transition from the podcast to YouTube, because I want to focus on YouTube a little bit more. I'll be uploading this to YouTube, but soon it might just become a thing on Spotify and iTunes, and it might not be uploaded to YouTube. And I'll just have the reviews on YouTube. I do like doing spoiler-free reviews, but there might be a couple reviews, I don't know, like in the future about different films that I have planned, that I might want to do a discussion video about it as well. And it might be like a 15 to 20 minute video. So for now, it's just going to be spoiler-free 7 to 6 to 8 minute videos. But I definitely plan on doing discussion videos on YouTube too. And saying that, I'll wrap it up here. Thank you all for listening. I really enjoy discussing more in depth on this format. And I feel like I get more freedom in terms of length, because a normal YouTube video, like, I can't go on for 40 minutes talking about a movie on a YouTube video. Like, it might be easier to do it on a podcast. I will test out a spoiler discussion and spoiler-free review, like 15 to 20 minute video on the channel at some point. But for now, I'm just going to keep the discussions on the podcast. I'd also like to go over my new schedule, because I'm adapting a new schedule. I'm planning on releasing mostly spoiler-free reviews once a week on my YouTube channel. with a follow-up podcast episode just like this one that is more discussion orientated. There'll be Q&As and guests and stuff like that, so I can talk about more film-related topics with you guys, because that's the whole point of the podcast, right? I really want to engage with you guys more, so I'm still keeping the podcast mostly for that reason. In terms of podcast upload dates, I'm going to try and focus them for Friday to Saturday uploads for podcast discussion episodes. I want to release them sooner than later after my spoiler-free reviews, so that way you guys can just get into the discussion and I can just get into it sooner. So that way I'm not waiting like a few days and then I just come back to it and it's not as engaging. It's better if I come off the spoiler-free review and then jump right into discussion. And this week I'll be talking about Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, being that it's the 10th anniversary. So look forward to that. Again, thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you after the credits.